Good afternoon, one and all. Welcome to my humble abode. No Paddy with his Sunday brunch this week, as well as Norwich City. He is enjoying a well-deserved winter break. Nonetheless, we have got some video content to bring you. Yesterday, I travelled to Birmingham to take a look at Norwich City new boy Sam McCallum in action for Coventry City against Bolton yesterday. It was interesting to get to see him. We also got to speak to him at the end of the game as well. There's some quotes that are live now on pinken.com. There's also a scout report that's going to be going up and some Mark Robins reaction as well. So plenty of sort of analysis, reaction from yesterday's game to follow over on our various channels. But I thought I'd do a bit of a sit-down video talk about basically how I analysed his performance, perhaps his strengths, his weaknesses that certainly I picked out. Is, of course, you have to caveat it all with the fact that I only saw one game. I haven't seen him throughout this season. He's playing in a Coventry side that are doing very well in the league. Of course, they're occupying the League One playoffs at the moment, but will certainly fancy their chances to push on and try and push that top two for certain. And the way they played yesterday, he's playing in a. I think there's some sort of preconceptions, and I was probably guilty of having those yesterday, of going to a League One game and expecting it to be a bit physical, and I mean it was, in fairness. I mean, to give you some sort of background, I suppose, on yesterday's game, there was an incident in the second half where Toto Nsiala, who is on loan from Ipswich, who's a centre-back, quite a big, strong, physical centre-back, was challenged in the air by 5'4" Callum O'Hare, who plays for Coventry. Looks very good, actually, very tidy. And he is an attacking midfielder, and they both sort of, it's one of those where they both sort of ran together and clashed heads, and Ciala was knocked out, and Callum O'Hare shared a nasty picture on social media yesterday of his head, and it had been split open from the top of his forehead all the way down, and had blood oozing out of that, and Ciala didn't carry on the game. O'Hare did. But anyway, that I think you are guilty of going into watching a League One game or a lower league game with those preconceptions because you watch Premier League football every week and you become accustomed to a standard. But actually, in Coventry, Sam McCallum is playing for a very good football inside who want to play out from the back, who want to build up their play through the thirds, and who want to be quite patient in their possession. And of course, there's variation within that. They did look to go long at times to Amadou Bakayoko when he was on the pitch, and Max Biamu later on when they were searching a winner. But overall, very impressed with sort of the style of play that was being played there. And I think, considering all of the off-pitch politics and all of the instability and the financial issues, and of course the fact that they're playing in St Andrews, which is it's really sad, to be honest, that they haven't got a permanent home ground. They have got a stable manager and a stable team with Mark Robins and his backroom staff, and the way they're getting that side to play, considering the lack of investment and equally the level, I suppose, is quite impressive, and they did impress me. But Sam McCallum, let's focus on in there. I'm going to sort of look to my right because I've got my notes I made from yesterday on my laptop screen, which you may be able to pick up in my glasses every so often. But I want to make sure that everything I say is correct and sort of the notes I made at the time. So to give you that sort of analysis. So yeah, he was playing as a left wing back in a 3-5-2. Interestingly, when Coventry had the ball in deep positions, particularly when they sort of had the ball in their right wing back position, he would occupy a very, very wide position, almost heels chalk on the heels from the touchline. He would stretch the play right out, and that allowed Coventry with an outlet to switch their possession, and that is all in aid of trying to break down a block. I think if you think of a defensive block, often when they move, they're pretty. I mean, Bolton were pretty passive, but the way a defensive block works is you're solid, you're hard to play through, and you just shift from side to side like that. So by having that outlet, it allows them to do it quickly and to try and almost disrupt the shape of that defensive block. And he was pivotal in that. And the wide shape also helped because, and this is something that Pep Guardiola has spoken about, and I'm not comparing Mark Robins to Pep Guardiola, but you then, as a player, you have to have trust in your other players to try and find you with a pass. And he had to receive a variety of passes. There were some crossfield balls. There were some that were really drilled into him. And actually, in terms of his technical ability and his ability to deal with those varying types of passes, he was very good. And he dealt with them very well. There was a time in the second half where he received a lovely crossfield ball, and his first touch took him inside, and he pretty much took out two Bolton midfielders, and then played the ball to a midfielder and gave him another angle to work the play. I think I think it might have been O'Hare actually who turned, or Kelly, who was also impressive, who turned around and looked to play in a different direction. But it was nice to see him have that confidence on the ball, and that is something, if you think about a Norwich City footballer, that is what Daniel Farke wants. First and foremost, do they have the technical ability? For me, that's a massive tick. I think it's probably the thing I left the ground thinking most of all, that there was a level of technique there that would make playing for a Norwich City side quite effective. And I think he's actually at the perfect club in terms of the way that Coventry play and the way they utilise him, because he is a left wing back, and effectively Norwich play wing backs, but in the shape of full backs at times. That is pretty much as close to the role he will play at Norwich City as he can possibly get. So that really was quite pleasing to see. It was good to see his intelligence as well, and the ball was worked over to that side. Right, okay, I'm going to pull myself out of this, because I know if that switch of play comes, I've got space to drive into. And this is an interesting point, because I don't think he possessed, and I certainly didn't see that yesterday, the raw pace to go at players one-on-one and to beat them on the outside. But what he does use is his tactical understanding and his positional understanding to know when to pull out and work an option for space, or when to come in and help overload the midfield so that they can play, so they can get a numerical advantage to allow them to progress the ball further up the pitch. That's what he did really well. And that's what I've got written down. Steps into midfield to create overloads, which he did excellently, particularly in the first half. I think the second half was a bit more testing, which I'll come on to in a moment. Stretched the shape really well. For me, a few areas where I was kind of a bit unsure. His pace was the first one. Didn't really see a raw pace, which isn't necessary to a fullback. But I think I was perhaps expecting that a little bit, but didn't see too much of that. There's definitely an athleticism, definitely an ability to get up and down. It perhaps wasn't at the pace of someone like Max Aarons, for example. If we're thinking pace, probably Jamal Lewis levels of pace, where he's not slow by any stretch of the imagination, but he's not rapid either. I think he is probably where he needs to be in terms of his pace. In the transition, I felt that there were a couple of times as well, again, particularly in the first half, where the ball got turned over and he perhaps didn't recover in the way that he needed to. And again, this is just about refinement more than anything else. He's a 19-year-old, 18 months ago, who's playing non-league football, so that to an extent is to be expected. But he just at times needed to be more aware that he needed to track back and recover in the transition. Fortunately, because Coventry play a free at the back and their wing backs are so high, it essentially allows the defensive midfielders to drop in and create a back four. But even so, I just felt his recovery runs were a little bit slow is not the right word, but certainly lacking a little bit. Right, let's go to the second half then, because that was a different test. I think the first half we got to see all of his technical ability and the way he uses the ball and how he supports midfield, and Coventry effectively create a five-man midfield when they're in possession. Dabo on the right and McCallum on the left really give them nice options and nice visible options, because a lot of their play is so congested that they do have those outlets, but then they can step in and help create overloads as well. But in the second half, Dennis Politic, which might be a name that rings a few bells because he was actually linked to Norwich City. I don't know if it was might have been last summer actually, when Bolton were having troubles, and he was very good. Had a very sort of a good run in the first half, where Morosi for Coventry, who's their goalkeeper, who made a plethora of good saves really to keep them in the game, prevented him. But for the second half, Politic posed a real threat. His pace, his creativity almost pinned McCallum back, and we got to see a bit more. It was quite nice from my perspective, because I got to see a bit more of him from a defensive perspective, and I felt in terms of when he was engaged one-on-one, so when a winger was trying to beat him on the outside or cut inside, I felt his body positioning was very good, got himself nice and side on, and he closed space pretty well and got tight to Politic quite well as well, and Emmanuel as well, who's on the right-hand side. I felt he dealt with Emmanuel probably more comfortably than Politic, who was up probably with O'Hare, probably the best player on the pitch for me yesterday. But there was a moment for Bolton's equaliser where Politic, and again, this comes back into the recovery run that I was talking about. They turn over possession, they break at pace. Politics is with McCallum like that, and Politic just peels off, creates a run inside, meets the volley and volleys it home. Was McCallum responsible? I think he probably could have done better, to be honest, and I think he acknowledged that when he spoke to us after the game as well. He's probably quite frustrated with himself for that, but there you go. That is the refinement that we need to see from Sam McCallum before he arrives at Norwich City next season. Sorry, it's not quite turned out that soon. I also felt, and again, this might lean into what I've just said about Politic, and this might be the reason, but equally there were moments in the first half as well where there was a bit of a hesitancy to support the attack. Coventry would have worked the ball from the right and got to the spell where they'd look to play it out to the left, and you'd expect McCallum to be there, and he's still sort of parked in a back four rather. And again, that may be because Dabo has advanced and the defensive midfield pushed up, and that means he does need to slot in. But then they lost all width on the left-hand side, and attacks broke down. So for me, again, it's that decision-making and that sort of youthful exuberance and almost harnessing that into some tactical understanding. And once he does get that side of the game, and Mark Robbins said that his tactical understanding and the way he views the game does need to be a little bit better. But overall, if I was to sort of give him a grade, maybe I've sort of walked into that. I think I'd probably give him a 7 for the performance yesterday. I felt there was a lot of good stuff. He was quite quiet a little bit, but I felt what he did quite well. Certainly, I can see why Norwich City have departed with quite a significant sum of money to bring him to the club, because in terms of the way that Daniel Farke likes his fullbacks to play, on the front foot, positionally quite high, supporting the midfield, I think he will slot into that mould as well. There were just those areas of refinements that I've touched upon that he needs to improve on. But there you go. There's your scout report for Sam McCallum. If you want to see that probably articulated better and in written form, pinken.com is the place to go. That should be up on Sunday evening as I record this. So there you go. Thank you very much for watching. And of course, all steam ahead to Liverpool now.